The paper slid across the conference table and stopped right in front of me. I didn't even need to read the whole thing. My name wasn't there. My stomach dropped as applause broke out around the room. Too loud, too sudden. People smiled. Chairs scraped. Someone clapped me on the shoulder, not meeting my eyes. My manager stood at the head of the table, grinning like he'd just pulled off a magic trick. I felt heat crawl up my neck. Excluded. Publicly. Deliberately. And then the contractor leaned forward, frowned at the list, and asked the question that cracked the room open. So, who's actually been running this project? Silence slammed down hard. Every eye in that room suddenly found somewhere else to look. My manager's smile froze on his face. The contractor's pen hovered over his notepad, waiting. I sat perfectly still, hands folded in my lap, heart pounding so loud I thought everyone could hear it. This was the moment everything changed. My manager answered immediately. Too immediately. "Oh, I have," he said, voice smooth and practiced like he'd rehearsed it. I stared at my hands under the table, fingers curled tight, nails biting into my palm. My chest felt hollow, like something had been ripped out and left echoing. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The contractor didn't look convinced. His eyes narrowed slightly as he glanced down at the list again, then back up at my manager. Neither was I convinced. This was the moment my title should have mattered. Instead, I was invisible, erased from the very project I had built from nothing. The air in the room felt thick and heavy. Someone coughed. Papers rustled. My manager kept talking, filling the silence with vague statements about leadership and vision. But I could see it, the way the contractor's jaw tightened, the way his pen stopped moving. He knew something was wrong. My name is Lily Parker. And up until that meeting, I thought loyalty still counted for something. I had given 3 years to this company, building systems that actually worked, training people who barely knew where to start, staying late when everyone else went home. I believed that hard work spoke for itself. I believed that competence would be recognized. I was wrong about a lot of things back then. Wrong about how corporate politics actually worked. Wrong about thinking my manager would ever give me credit for anything. Wrong about believing that doing excellent work was enough. The expansion project was supposed to be my breakthrough moment. Instead, it became the moment I learned exactly how disposable I was. But what my manager didn't know, what none of them knew yet, was that you can't erase someone who built the foundation. Eventually, the cracks start to show. 3 months earlier, I was the one staying late, sketching workflows on whiteboards long after the cleaners left. I built the expansion framework from scratch. Processes, timelines, fail-safes. No applause. No recognition. Just work. The office would empty out around 6, and I'd still be there with markers and sticky notes, mapping out how different departments would integrate during the expansion. I created contingency plans for problems that hadn't even happened yet. I documented everything in detailed guides that anyone could follow. My manager would walk past sometimes, coffee in hand, and nod approvingly. "Great dedication," he'd say. But he never asked what I was actually building. He never tried to understand the system. He just assumed it would be there when he needed it. And it was. I believed that if you did your job well enough, someone would notice. Someone would see the hours and the expertise. I was wrong. They sat around the table with notebooks open, nodding as I explained the system. Every person on that expansion team learned it from me. I walked them through each phase, answered every question, corrected their notes when they misunderstood something critical. I remember thinking, this is it. This is what it leads to. This was my audition for leadership, even though nobody had called it that. I spent 2 weeks in training sessions, breaking down complex processes into simple steps they could follow. I created handouts. I built practice scenarios. I made sure they understood not just the how, but the why behind every decision. They were grateful, at least. Few of them said thank you. One told me I should be teaching full-time. I smiled and said I was just helping the team succeed. I didn't know I was training my replacements. I didn't know that every piece of knowledge I shared was being cataloged as something my manager could claim credit for later. My manager pulled me aside a week before the announcement. "Leadership's about presence," he said, smiling in that way that made my skin crawl. "You're great behind the scenes." Behind the scenes. That's where he wanted me to stay. I nodded, unsure what to say. He continued, talking about how the expansion team needed people with executive presence and client-facing confidence. Code words. I understood them perfectly. He meant people like him. People who could talk smoothly in meetings even when they didn't know what they were talking about. People who looked the part. I was too quiet, he implied. Too focused on the actual work. Not enough flash. Not enough performance. "You understand, right?" he asked, hand on my shoulder like we were old friends. Like he was doing me a favor. I said I understood. And I did. I understood exactly what was happening. I just didn't know yet what I was going to do about it. The subject line hit my inbox at 8:02 a.m. Expansion team confirmed. My coffee sat untouched as I opened the email, already knowing what I'd find. I scrolled once. My name never appeared. Instead, there were 6 names. 6 people I had personally trained who wouldn't know the first thing about this project without me. My manager's name sat at the top, bolded, with the title Project Lead. My hands started shaking. Not from anger yet. Just shock. Pure cold shock. I read the email 3 more times, thinking maybe I'd missed something. Maybe there was a second page. Maybe my name was listed under a different section. But no. I was completely absent. Erased. Like I had never existed. Like the past 3 months had never happened. I closed my laptop and sat very still for a long moment, staring at the gray office wall in front of me. Then I forwarded the email to my personal account. Just in case. Back in the conference room, the contractor's eyes flicked between me and my manager. "Interesting," he said slowly, tapping his pen against his notepad. The word felt heavy, loaded with meaning that hung in the air. My manager laughed, a forced sound that didn't reach his eyes. He launched into an explanation about team dynamics and distributed leadership, words that sounded impressive but meant nothing. I stayed quiet. That silence was the first decision I made. The first conscious choice to stop trying to make myself smaller, to stop protecting him from the consequences of his lies. I could have jumped in. I could have defended him, filled in the gaps in his explanation, made him look competent. That's what I'd always done before. But something had shifted. The contractor wrote something in his notes, expression unreadable. My manager kept talking, digging himself deeper without realizing it. I simply sat there, watching it unfold, and said nothing at all. I walked back to my desk past people who wouldn't meet my eyes. The office felt different now, like I was seeing it for the first time. Conversations stopped when I approached. Someone pretended to be very interested in their computer screen. Another person suddenly needed to make a phone call. One colleague, Marcus from accounting, whispered as I passed, "I didn't know." I nodded but didn't stop walking. Neither did I thought. I didn't know my manager was capable of this level of erasure. I didn't know that 3 years of excellent work could be dismissed so easily. I didn't know that loyalty was a one-way street. My desk looked the same as always. Neat, organized, with the project binder sitting prominently in the corner. The binder that contained every workflow, every timeline, every contingency plan I'd created. The binder my manager had never bothered to open. I sat down, opened my laptop, and started working like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. At the next planning session, the contractor asked about a contingency protocol. "What happens if the third-party vendor misses their deadline?" he asked, looking directly at my manager. My manager froze. His mouth opened then closed. He shuffled through papers on the table, buying time. Every head turned, waiting for an answer. The silence stretched uncomfortably. I could have let it continue. I could have watched him struggle. But old habits die hard. I answered calmly, laying out the 3-tier backup plan I designed months ago. Just facts. No emotion. No emphasis. I didn't look at him as I spoke. I kept my eyes on the contractor, who was writing quickly in his notes. When I finished, my manager cleared his throat. Yes, exactly what I was about to say, he added weakly. Nobody believed him. I could see it in their faces, the doubt creeping in, questions forming. The contractor nodded slowly, still writing. He didn't say anything, but he didn't need to. After that, questions started drifting toward me. Not officially. Casually. Lily, quick check. What was the timeline for Phase 2 again? Lily, what happens if the budget needs adjustment? Lily, can you clarify the integration process? Each time, my manager laughed too loudly, jumping in to answer after I'd already provided the information. He'd rephrase what I said, adding unnecessary jargon, trying to reclaim authority he'd never actually had. The team started to notice. I saw the sideways glances, the raised eyebrows. People began directing their questions to me first, then glancing at my manager as an afterthought. He didn't seem to realize what was happening. Or maybe he did, and that's why his laugh kept getting louder, more desperate. I kept my answers short and professional. I didn't gloat. I didn't make him look bad. I didn't need to. The truth was doing that work all by itself, slowly and inevitably, like water wearing down stone. A summary went out listing project contributors. My name was gone. Again. It was the second email that week, this time sent to senior leadership, outlining who had done what. My manager's name appeared 6 times. Mine appeared 0. I stared at the screen, feeling something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't an oversight. This was deliberate. This was a pattern. He was systematically erasing my contributions, building a narrative where he was the architect and I was... what? A helpful assistant. A note-taker. Nothing at all. That night I started saving everything. Every email I'd sent. Every document I'd created. Every training session outline. Every workflow diagram. I created a folder on my personal laptop and methodically backed up 3 months of work. Version histories. I stopped trusting memory and started trusting evidence. I wasn't angry anymore, or at least not just angry. I was focused. Coldly, carefully focused. Documentation became my evening routine. After work, I'd sit at my kitchen table with tea going cold beside me, organizing files chronologically. I pulled timestamps from email threads showing when I'd sent the original frameworks, weeks before my manager even knew the expansion project existed. I found messages where team members thanked me for training them, explicitly mentioning specific concepts I'd taught. I compiled everything into a clean, simple folder structure. One document laid out the timeline. When I'd started working on the expansion, when I'd presented my framework to management, when training had occurred, when my manager had suddenly become project lead. Another document contained screenshots of my original work, whiteboards I'd photographed, drafts with my revision history, notes in my handwriting. I wasn't planning to use any of it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I needed to know it existed. I needed to feel less powerless. Evidence gave me that. Knowledge gave me that. He stopped by my desk unexpectedly one afternoon. Too friendly. Too casual. You're doing great, he said, perching on the edge of my desk like we were friends. Just wanted to check in. Make sure you're comfortable with how things are going. I looked up from my computer. Fine, I said simply. Good, good. He picked up a pen from my desk, fidgeting with it. The contractor's been asking a lot of detailed questions lately. Very thorough guy. Waited. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page, he continued. You know, presenting a unified front. Being a team player. There it was. The real message. He wanted me to stay quiet. Stay flexible. Stop answering questions that made him look incompetent. Of course, I said, taking my pen back. I always answer accurately. His smile tightened. Right. Of course. Flexible meant silent. Compliant. Invisible. I nodded, turned back to my screen. He stood there for another moment, then walked away. I heard his footsteps fade down the hallway. The contractor requested a deep dive session. Leadership attended, the CEO, the CFO, two vice presidents I'd never spoken to directly. The conference room felt smaller with all of them there, the air thick with expectation. My manager led the presentation, standing at the front with a laser pointer and the slides I'd created. He clicked through them confidently at first, talking about vision and strategy. Then he hit slide 7, the one detailing the technical integration process. He stumbled, stopped mid-sentence, stared at the screen like he'd never seen it before. The synchronization protocol here. He gestured vaguely at a diagram showing database architecture. Someone coughed. The CEO shifted in his seat. My manager kept talking, but his words became increasingly abstract, disconnected from the actual content on the slide. He stumbled over terminology I had written myself. Terms I'd specifically chosen because they were industry standard and clear. I watched the contractor's jaw tighten, watched him stop taking notes and just stare. "Who designed this framework?" the contractor asked, cutting off my manager mid-sentence. The question wasn't aggressive, just direct. Curious. My manager hesitated. Just a second. Just long enough for everyone to notice. "Well, the team collaborated. I'm asking who specifically created the integration architecture," the contractor interrupted, tapping his pen on the diagram. "Who made these decisions?" My manager's eyes flickered toward me, then away. It was a collaborative effort. Leadership provided the vision. "I understand." The contractor's voice was flat now. He turned in his chair, looking directly at me. "Ms. Parker, can you explain how this synchronization process works?" Every person in that room turned to look at me. CEO, CFO, the vice presidents, my manager face pale. I could have deflected. I could have said my manager should answer. But I didn't. That was enough. Enough silence, enough invisibility, enough erasure. "Yes," I said quietly. "I can. I designed this framework," I said, standing up slowly. My voice didn't shake. I walked to the front, and my manager stepped aside without being asked. I pointed to the diagram. The synchronization protocol uses a 3-layer validation system. First layer confirms data integrity at the source. Second layer handles real-time conflict resolution during transfer. Third layer performs post-integration verification. I explained each decision, each failsafe, each consideration. I answered follow-up questions from the contractor without hesitation. The CEO leaned forward, suddenly paying attention. When I finished, the room was completely silent. No edge in my voice. No accusation. Just truth, clear and undeniable. My manager stood against the wall now, arms crossed, face unreadable. I returned to my seat. The contractor wrote extensively in his notes, nodding slowly. "Thank you," he said. "That was very clear." The CEO looked at my manager, then at me, then back at his notes. Something had shifted in the room. Leadership asked for documentation after the meeting. "We need to verify the development timeline," the CFO said, directing his words to my manager but looking at me. My manager's hands twitched. "Of course. I can pull together." "Actually," I said quietly, "I have comprehensive documentation readily available. I can send it within the hour." The CFO nodded. "Please do. Send it directly to me." I did. Every email, every diagram, every workflow, every training outline. All time-stamped, all organized, all undeniable. I included the original whiteboard photos from 3 months ago, showing my handwriting laying out the entire framework before my manager had even been assigned to the project. I attached the training materials I'd created, with version histories showing I was the sole author. I didn't add commentary. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke clearly enough. That afternoon my inbox stayed silent. No response from the CFO. No message from my manager. Just quiet. My manager stopped smiling. He stopped visiting my desk. He stopped making jokes in meetings. He just stopped. Processes were reviewed over the next 2 weeks. I was called into meetings I'd never been invited to before. Senior leadership asked detailed questions about development decisions, implementation timelines, risk assessments. Each time I answered with the same calm precision. Each time my manager sat silently in the corner, adding nothing. Emails resurfaced. Chains from months ago that proved who had originated each idea, who had done the actual work. My name appeared in reply after reply, explaining concepts, solving problems, training team members. His name appeared mostly in forwarded messages, passing my work up the chain without adding value. Ownership became clear, undeniable, documented beyond any possible dispute. I didn't speak unless asked. I didn't volunteer information or throw anyone under the bus. I just answered questions honestly, showed receipts when requested, and let the facts arrange themselves. The contractor attended 2 of these review meetings, taking notes but never commenting. His expression never changed, but I noticed he stopped directing any questions to my manager at all. He cornered me near the elevators one evening. Most people had left. The hallway was empty. "You're making me look bad," he hissed, stepping too close. I didn't back away. "I didn't take anything that wasn't mine," I said evenly. "I answered questions truthfully. You know what you're doing." His face was red now, voice rising. "You're sabotaging me. After everything I've done for your career, what have you done?" Yes. My voice stayed level. "Specifically, what have you done for my career?" He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. "I trained the team," I continued quietly. "I built the framework. I created the documentation. I answered every question during implementation. You took credit. That's not the same as helping my career." He stepped back like I'd slapped him. For a moment we just stood there, the truth hanging between us like smoke. Then he turned and walked away without another word. I watched him go, hands steady, breathing calm. The elevator arrived. I stepped in, pressed the button, and descended. The expansion team was restructured 3 days later. An email went out from senior leadership. Brief, professional, clinical. After reviewing the project framework and development timeline, we are realigning team roles to better reflect actual contributions and expertise. His name disappeared from the leadership list. No announcement beyond that email. No drama. No public confrontation. Just absence. My manager was reassigned to a different department. Not fired. Not punished publicly. Just moved. Quietly removed from anything important. I saw him once in the hallway afterward. He didn't look at me. Someone new took over as project lead temporarily. Marcus from accounting, the one who'd whispered that he didn't know. He immediately scheduled a meeting with me to discuss transition details. "I want to make sure you're properly credited," he said. "And honestly, I'm going to need your help. You built this whole thing." He nodded. "I can do that." No satisfaction. No vindication. Just quiet acknowledgement that the truth had finally caught up. Leadership called me in 2 weeks later. The CEO's office. Somewhere I'd never been. It was bigger than I'd imagined. Windows overlooking the city. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Please sit." Sat. He slid a folder across the polished wood. "We've been reviewing the expansion project thoroughly. Your contributions are substantial. More than substantial. You built the entire framework." Waited. "We made a mistake," he continued. "Several mistakes. In oversight, in leadership assignment, in recognition." He tapped the folder. "This is an offer for a new position. Lead systems architect. Direct report to me. Full authority over the expansion implementation and any similar projects going forward." I pulled the folder toward me but didn't open it. "This comes with a significant raise," he added. "And a formal apology. What happened should never have happened." I nodded slowly. "May I review this before responding?" "Of course. Take your time." I stood, folder in hand. "Thank you." I didn't answer right away. I needed time to think. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, The offer letter spread across my kitchen table. It was generous. More money than I'd expected. Real authority. Direct access to leadership. Everything I should have had from the beginning. But something felt wrong. I kept coming back to one question. Why did it take public exposure for them to see my value? Why did I have to be erased first, humiliated first, before they decided I deserved recognition? I thought about the past 3 months. The late nights building something I believed in. The careful training sessions. The moment I saw that list without my name. The silence in the conference room when the contractor asked his question. I thought about my manager's face when I answered. I realized something sitting there in my kitchen. City lights glowing through the window. I didn't want the job that required me to be invisible first. I didn't want to work for people who only valued me after a contractor forced them to look. I wanted something different. Something I'd have to find somewhere else. I accepted a different offer. A competitor had reached out 2 weeks earlier, right after word spread about my role in the expansion project. They knew what I'd built. They knew what I could do. They offered me the title of Senior Systems Director, leading their entire infrastructure modernization initiative. Real authority from day one. Not as a reward for surviving mistreatment, but as recognition of what I could create. I gave my current company 4 weeks' notice. Professional. Clean. The CEO tried to counteroffer. He declined. I appreciate the recognition, I told him. But I need to work somewhere that sees value before it becomes a crisis. He didn't argue. He knew. I left without speeches or warnings. I trained my replacement thoroughly, because that's who I am. I documented everything one final time. I said goodbye to the people who mattered. And on my last day, I walked out carrying 1 box with 3 years of personal items, leaving behind the company that had tried to erase me. As I walked out for the final time, I passed the empty office where he used to sit. The door was closed. The nameplate had been removed. No messages. No apologies. No contact. Just quiet. And the certainty that I would never let anyone decide my value again. The contractor was in the lobby when I left, coincidentally picking up visitor credentials for another meeting. He saw me, walked over. Ms. Parker. Leaving. He nodded. New opportunity. He smiled slightly. Good. For what it's worth, I've worked with a lot of companies. What happened in that meeting? I've seen it before. Too often. But I've also seen what happens after. The truth always surfaces. Always. Thank you, I said. For asking the right question. I just asked who was running the project, he replied. You did the rest. I walked out into the sunlight, box under my arm, head high. I didn't need revenge. I needed the truth to speak when I stopped begging to be heard. And it had. Finally it had.